The galaxy was vast and old. For thousands of years, three great species ruled the stars. The Velthari were beings made of living crystal who could speak through light. The Nexari existed as pure energy that could take any shape they wanted. The Corvin were part machine and part living creature, with metal bones and computer brains. These three species created the Galactic Federation. They had amazing technology. Their ships could jump between stars in seconds. Their weapons could destroy planets. They could build anything they imagined. Then 50 years ago, they found Earth. The humans on that small blue planet were still burning fuel to fly into space. They fought each other with metal bullets and explosives. They had never traveled beyond their own moon. The Federation Council looked at these creatures and laughed. "Primitive," said the Velthari Council leader, his crystal body glowing with amusement. "They still use chemical reactions for everything." "Barbaric," agreed the Nexari representative, shifting from one glowing form to another. "Look how they fight among themselves. No honor, no rules." The Corvin simply recorded the data with their mechanical minds. Classification: primitive species. Threat level: 0. Recommendation: monitor only. Admiral Quan Tae Min sat in the command center of Luna Base, watching the stars through the reinforced windows. He was 55 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. Around him, human officers worked at their simple computer screens. Their technology looked like toys compared to what the Federation used. "Sir," called Lieutenant Park from the communications station, "we're getting another rejection from the Federation Council." Quan sighed. For 5 years, Earth had been asking to join the Federation as full members. Every request was denied. Humans were allowed to watch and learn, but nothing more. They were like children in the eyes of the galaxy. On the orbital research station above Earth, Dr. Yu Da-un stared at her computer screen in frustration. She was one of only 12 humans allowed to work with Federation technology. Her job was to study alien cultures and write reports that nobody read. "Request denied again," she muttered, looking at the message on her screen. She had asked to study human military history. She wanted to understand why humans fought so differently from other species. But the Federation did not care about human warfare. War was supposed to be civilized, with rules and honor. Yu Da-yun was 32 years old and had spent 10 years learning about alien species. She knew that humans were different, but she could not explain how. Other species fought with beautiful formations and elegant tactics. Humans fought like wild animals, using whatever worked. "Primitive," the aliens always said. But Yu Da-un wondered if they were missing something important. Far away, on the edge of the galaxy, something stirred in the darkness between stars. It had been sleeping for 1,000,000 years, waiting for the galaxy to grow fat and weak. Now, it was time to feed again. The Devastator swarm began to move. The first Federation outpost to encounter them sent a routine message. "Unknown ships detected, attempting communication." That was the last message anyone received from Outpost Zeta-7. Fleet Commander Park Woo-jin of the Velthari Navy was enjoying a peaceful patrol when the emergency signals began. His crystal ship, the Star Song, was one of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy. It could phase through solid matter and fire beams of pure light. "Commander," called his communications officer, "we're receiving distress calls from the Outer Rim. Multiple outposts have gone silent." Park Woo-jin had served in the Federation Navy for 300 years. He had never seen a threat the Federation could not handle. "Set course for the Outer Rim. Full speed." The Star Song jumped through space, covering thousands of light years in minutes. When they arrived at Outpost Zeta-7, they found nothing but empty space and floating debris. "Impossible," whispered Park Woo-jin. The outpost had been built into an asteroid the size of a small moon. Now there was nothing left but dust and metal fragments. Then they saw the enemy. The swarm ships looked like living creatures. They were black and twisted, covered in what looked like skin and bone. They moved without engines, flowing through space like swimming fish. When they saw the star song, they turned toward it with hungry interest. Park Woo-jin ordered his weapons to fire. Beams of pure light struck the swarm ships, but instead of exploding, the enemy vessels absorbed the energy. Their skin glowed for a moment, then returned to black. "They're adapting to our weapons," reported the tactical officer. More swarm ships appeared from nowhere. They surrounded the star song like a pack of wolves. Park Woo-jin tried to phase his ship through them, but the swarm ships followed him into the parallel dimension. They could exist in multiple realities at once. The Federation's most advanced warship was destroyed in less than 5 minutes. Back on Earth, General Han Soo-young received the first reports of the attacks. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She had spent 30 years preparing Earth's defenses, even though everyone said humans had nothing to fear. "How many outposts?" she asked. 17 confirmed destroyed," replied her aide. "The Federation is calling for emergency sessions." Han Soo-young looked at the tactical display showing Federation space. Red markers showed where outposts had been destroyed. The pattern was clear. Something was eating its way through the galaxy, heading toward the core worlds, heading toward Earth. On Luna Base, Admiral Kwon Tae-min watched the news reports with growing concern. The Federation was calling this an unfortunate incident and assuring everyone that their mighty fleets would handle the problem. But Kwon could read between the lines. The Federation was scared. For the first time in galactic history, something was destroying their ships faster than they could be built. Captain Kim Min-ho volunteered to take his ship, the aging cruiser Incheon, to investigate the attacks. He was 40 years old and had never seen real combat, but he was curious about this new enemy. "Request denied," came the Federation response. "Human vessels are not equipped for this mission." But Kim Min-ho had not asked the Federation. He had asked Admiral Kwon. "Take the ship," Kwon ordered. "But stay hidden. We need to know what we're dealing with." The Incheon was old and slow by Federation standards. It had thick armor and simple weapons. Kim Min-ho and his crew flew it to the nearest attacked system and hid behind a gas giant's moon. What they found there changed everything. The planet that had once held a Federation colony was still there, but it was wrong. The surface was covered in black, twisted structures that pulsed like a heartbeat. Swarm ships moved around it like insects around a hive. "They're not just destroying," whispered Kim Min-ho. "They're converting. They're turning everything into more of themselves." The swarm was not just an enemy. It was a plague that consumed entire civilizations and made them part of itself. And it was learning from every species it absorbed, becoming stronger and smarter with each victory. Earth had just become the next target. The news from the Outer Rim grew worse each day. Admiral Park Woo-jin sent his final message before his ship was destroyed. The recording showed swarm vessels tearing apart Federation cruisers like paper. The proud Velthari crystals shattered, under attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Fleet Admiral Jin Seo-hoon of the Nexari watched his energy beings try to fight the swarm. When his ships fired their plasma cannons, the enemy absorbed the energy and used it to grow stronger. When his forces tried to phase shift away, the swarm followed them through dimensions that should have been impossible to enter. "They learned too fast," Jin Seo-hoon reported to the Federation Council. "Every tactic we use, they counter within minutes. Every weapon we fire, they adapt to and improve upon." The Corvin tried their mechanical precision next. Their computer minds calculated perfect battle strategies. Their ships moved in flawless formations. Their weapons fired with mathematical accuracy. The swarm destroyed them anyway. Captain An Jae-sung commanded the Corvin dreadnought Logic Prime. His metal body was connected directly to the ship's computers. He could think faster than any organic being and process millions of calculations per second. None of it mattered. The swarm ships flowed around his perfect formations like water around rocks. They ignored his logical tactics and fought with what seemed like pure instinct. When An Jae-sung tried to predict their movements, they changed direction for no reason he could understand. "Illogical," he transmitted as his ship exploded. "Their tactics make no sense." On Earth, Dr. Lee Hai-jin studied the enemy data in her laboratory. She was one of Earth's best scientists, known for solving problems that others could not. The swarm samples that Captain Kim Min-ho had secretly collected were unlike anything she had ever seen. "It's not just one organism," she explained to General Han Soo-young. "The swarm is millions of different species all merged together. Every time they consume a civilization, they add its knowledge and abilities to their collective." Han Soo-young studied the microscope images. The swarm tissue looked like a nightmare combination of crystal, energy, and metal. All the Federation species twisted together into something new and horrible. "They've been doing this for millions of years," Lee Hai-jin continued. "Sleeping in dark space between galaxies, then waking up to feed. They've consumed thousands of civilizations." "What about weaknesses?" asked Han Soo-young. Lee Hai-jin shook her head. "They adapt to everything. Every attack makes them stronger. They learn from every defense and find ways around it." On Luna Base, Admiral Kwon Taemin received a message from the Federation Council. It was not a request for help or an offer of alliance. It was a demand. "Earth will provide raw materials for the war effort," the message read. "Mining output will be increased by 300%. All available metals and rare elements will be shipped to Federation shipyards immediately." The Federation still saw humans as useful only for digging things out of the ground. Kwon crumpled the message and threw it away. Around him, his officers continued their work. They were preparing for something the Federation could never imagine. "Sir," called Commander Song Ji-hoon from the tactical station. "Latest reports show the swarm has broken through the secondary defense line. They're heading for the core systems." Song Ji-hoon was 35 years old and had studied every battle in human history. While other species fought with honor and rules, humans had learned to fight dirty. They used tricks, traps, and tactics that civilized beings would never consider. "Time until they reach Sol system?" asked Kwon. 6 months, maybe less." Kwon nodded. 6 months to prepare for the impossible. 6 months to prove that primitive did not mean weak. Captain Choi In-suk received her orders at the Mars shipyards. She was to take her destroyer, the Soul, and join the Federation defensive lines. Her ship was small and ugly compared to Federation vessels, but it was built for one thing: fighting. "Orders understood," she replied. But privately, she had different plans. Choi In-suk was 42 years old and had never backed down from a fight. Her ship carried weapons that the Federation considered barbaric: nuclear missiles, kinetic railguns, and explosive charges. Simple technology, but devastatingly effective. The first swarm probe ships entered Sol system 3 weeks early. They came from the direction of Pluto, moving fast and silent. Federation sensors detected them easily, but the small ships seemed harmless. They were gathering information, the aliens decided. Standard reconnaissance. They were wrong. The probe ships were testing Earth's defenses. They sent scanning beams toward every human installation, analyzing weapons and armor. What they found confused them. Human technology was crude and simple. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their weapons were inefficient and wasteful. According to every calculation, humans should surrender immediately. But humans had something the swarm had never encountered before: unpredictability. Sergeant Major Nam Hyun-woo led the first human boarding party in galactic history. When a swarm probe ship came too close to Luna Base, he and his team used an old mining shuttle to get aboard. The swarm expected energy weapons and gravitational attacks. Instead, Nam Hyun-woo kicked down the door and started shooting with a chemical projectile weapon. His team threw explosive grenades and used cutting tools to tear the ship apart from the inside. "What the hell are they doing?" asked the Federation observer monitoring the battle. The swarm creatures inside the probe ship had never faced close combat. They tried to adapt their defenses, but how do you adapt to a human with a crowbar and a bad attitude? Nam Hyen Woo and his team destroyed the probe ship in 12 minutes. When they returned to Luna Base, they brought samples of swarm technology that no one had ever captured before. "Impossible," said the Federation Council when they saw the report. "Swarm ships cannot be boarded. Their defenses adapt to any intrusion." "Tell that to Sergeant Nam," replied Admiral Kwan. The real attack began 2 days later. 100 swarm ships dropped out of dark space near Jupiter. They were larger than the probe ships, covered in armor that shifted and changed as it analyzed. Federation weapons. Each ship was alive, breathing, hungry. The Federation fleet moved to intercept them. Crystal ships, energy beings, and mechanical dreadnoughts formed perfect battle lines, their weapons charged up with devastating power. The swarm ships scattered like startled fish. Instead of fighting in formation, they spread out across the solar system. Some headed for Earth, others toward Mars, still others toward the asteroid belt. They refused to fight the kind of organized battle the Federation expected. "Chaos," muttered Fleet Admiral Jin Seo-hoon. "Complete chaos. How do we fight an enemy with no strategy?" Captain Song Ji-hoon smiled as he watched the battle from Luna Base. "That's not chaos," he said. "That's opportunity." While the Federation fleets tried to reform their pretty formations, human ships launched from hidden bases throughout the solar system. They were old and ugly and slow, but they moved with purpose. Captain Choi In-suk took her destroyer toward the largest swarm ship. Instead of firing from long range like a civilized being, she accelerated to ramming speed. "This is insane," reported the Federation observer aboard her ship. "This is human," Choi In-suk replied, and slammed her ship into the swarm vessels. Sighed. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also did something the swarm had never experienced. For the first time in millions of years, a species had chosen to die rather than be absorbed. The swarm paused. Their ancient minds tried to understand this new concept. Why would a creature destroy itself and gain nothing? In that moment of confusion, the real human attack began. The Federation officers could not believe what they were seeing. Captain Choi In-suk had destroyed her own ship along with the enemy vessel. Her crew of 40 humans had died in the explosion. To the aliens, this seemed like madness. "Waste of resources," reported the Corvin tactical computer. "Inefficient exchange ratio." "Barbaric," agreed the Velthari observer. "No honor in mutual destruction." But Admiral Kwan Tae-min saw something different. He saw the swarm ships hesitate for the first time since the war began. Their perfect adaptation systems had never encountered a species willing to die for victory. "All ships," Kwan transmitted across the human fleet. "Execute Plan Mongoose." Plan Mongoose was something humans had been practicing for 30 years. While the Federation fought with elegant formations and honorable tactics, humans had studied every dirty trick in the book. They had learned from pirates, terrorists, and guerrilla fighters throughout their history. Captain Song Ji-hoon led the attack in his cruiser Busan. Instead of approaching the swarm ships directly, he hid his vessel behind an asteroid and launched nuclear mines. The mines looked like space debris until they got close to their targets. The swarm ships scanned the mines and dismissed them as harmless metal fragments. When the nuclear warheads exploded, the alien vessels were caught completely off guard. Deception, analyzed the swarm collective mind. Species uses false signals. Adaptation required. But before the swarm could adapt, Commander Ko Young-min attacked from a different direction. His frigate Gwangju used kinetic railguns to fire chunks of metal. At incredible speeds, the projectiles had no energy signature and no guidance system. They were just fast-moving rocks. The swarm's energy shields were designed to stop lasers and plasma bolts. They had no defense against simple kinetic impact. 3 swarm ships were torn apart by metal slugs traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. Primitive kinetic weapons, the swarm mind noted. Updating defensive protocols. Then Lieutenant Park Yun-soo did something even more unexpected. She took her fighter craft straight down the barrel of a swarm ship's main weapon. While the alien vessel was charging up to fire, she dropped a cluster of fusion bombs into its weapon port. The swarm ship exploded from the inside out. The Federation observers watched in horror as humans used tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They attacked from behind cover. They used deception and misdirection. They targeted enemy weapons while they were charging. They showed no mercy and asked for none. "This is not how war is conducted," protested the Velthari admiral. "Where is the honor? Where are the proper formations?" Dr. Yu Da-un, watching from the orbital research station, finally understood what made humans different. "They don't fight to prove they're better," she explained to her alien colleagues. "They fight to win." The swarm collective mind was experiencing something new: confusion. Every time they adapted to one human tactic, the humans changed to something completely different. There was no pattern to learn from, no logic to predict. Sergeant Major Nam Hyan-woo led another boarding action, this time against a swarm cruiser. His team used shaped charges to blow holes in the enemy hull, then stormed inside with chemical projectile weapons and melee combat tools. The swarm defenders had adapted to energy weapons and gravitational attacks. They had no idea how to fight. Humans with metal blades and explosive devices. Nam Hyan-woo's team fought their way to the ship's core and planted antimatter charges. Boarding actions impossible, the swarm had calculated. Interior defenses fully adaptive, but their calculations had assumed civilized attackers who would use civilized weapons. They had never faced humans who would beat their enemies to death with metal clubs if necessary. Captain Kim Min-ho took advantage of the chaos to launch a different kind of attack. His cruiser Incheon had been fitted with broadcasting equipment. Instead of shooting at the swarm ships, he transmitted human music at maximum volume. The swarm collective mind was designed to process and understand all forms of communication. When it tried to analyze human music, the results were catastrophic. Human artistic expression was so chaotic and emotional that it overloaded the aliens' logical thought processes. 3 swarm ships simply stopped functioning as their crews tried to understand what humans meant by rock and roll. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 27 swarm ships had been destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost 8 vessels, but they had proven something important. The swarm could be beaten. Fleet Admiral Jin Seo-hoon of the Nexari watched the human victory with amazement. "How did they do it?" he asked Dr. Yu Da-un. "They didn't follow any rules," she replied. "The swarm adapts by learning patterns. But humans don't have patterns. Every human commander fights differently. Every human tactic is unique." The swarm survivors retreated to the outer solar system to analyze what had happened. For the first time in millions of years, they had encountered a species that could not be predicted or understood. In their collective memory banks, they searched for similar encounters. They found none. Every species they had ever consumed had fought with logic and order. Even the most warlike civilizations had used consistent strategies and honorable tactics. Humans were different. They fought like madmen, using whatever worked without caring about honor or proper procedure. They would sacrifice their own ships to destroy enemies. They would use primitive weapons in advanced situations. They would attack when they should retreat, and retreat when they should attack. Species classification: unknown, the swarm mind concluded. Behavioral patterns: chaotic. Adaptation protocols: insufficient. On Luna Base, Admiral Kwon Tae-min met with his officers to plan the next phase. The swarm would return with more ships and better defenses. They would try to adapt to human tactics. "Let them try," said Captain Song Ji-hoon. "We have 10,000 years of human warfare to draw from." Every time they adapt to one approach, we'll use a different one. Commander Ko Young-min spread out star charts on the conference table. The swarm main fleet is still out there. Thousands of ships heading for the core systems. Even if we can beat them here, they'll destroy the Federation worlds. Then we don't let them reach the Federation worlds, said Quan. We take the fight to them. The Federation Council had been calling Earth constantly, demanding reports and explanations. They could not understand how primitive humans had defeated the swarm when advanced civilizations had failed. Request permission to study human military doctrine, transmitted the Velthari Council leader. Permission denied, Quan replied. We're too busy saving the galaxy. General Han Su-young activated Earth's hidden defenses. For 50 years, while the Federation had dismissed humans as primitive, Earth had been preparing for war. Not the clean, honorable war that civilized species fought, but the brutal, total war that humans understood. Military bases that looked like mining stations revealed their true purpose. Asteroid facilities began producing weapons instead of minerals. Civilian ships were converted into warships with welded-on armor and improvised weapons. Every human is now a soldier, Han Su-young announced. Every ship is now a warship. Every installation is now a fortress. The Federation observers were shocked. Humans were militarizing their entire civilization in a matter of days. Children learned to operate weapons. Elderly citizens volunteered for dangerous missions. Even the scientists and artists were ready to fight. This is madness, said the Corvin representative. Civilian populations cannot participate in military operations. Dr. Lee Haijin looked up from her laboratory where she was developing new anti-swarm weapons. In human history, she said, there's no such thing as a civilian when survival is at stake. The swarm main fleet arrived at the edge of Sol system 1 week later. 5,000 ships, each one larger and more dangerous than the probe force. They had spent the week adapting their defenses and tactics based on the previous battle. They were ready for nuclear weapons, kinetic attacks, and boarding actions. They had improved their energy shields and developed countermeasures for human deception tactics. Their collective mind was confident that the primitive species would be easily defeated this time. They were wrong again. Admiral Quan had no intention of fighting the same battle twice. As the swarm fleet approached Earth, he implemented something that no civilized species had ever attempted. He turned the entire solar system into a weapon. The swarm main fleet entered Sol system like a dark cloud of death. 5,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their living hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from dozens of conquered civilizations. Each vessel was larger than a federation. Dreadnought and twice as deadly, Admiral Quan Taemin watched them approach from Luna Base's command center. His officers waited for orders, their faces calm despite the impossible odds. Around them, status lights showed green across the board. Earth's hidden defenses were ready. Sir, reported Commander Song Ji-hoon, enemy fleet will reach Mars orbit in 12 hours. Acknowledged, Quan replied. He turned to his communications officer. Send the activation code. Yes, sir. Transmitting Protocol 7 now. Protocol 7 was something humans had never explained to their Federation allies. For 50 years, while the galaxy had dismissed Earth as primitive, humans had been turning their solar system into the ultimate fortress. Colonel Park Soo-bin received the activation signal at Ceres base. What the Federation thought was a simple mining station was actually the control center for humanity's most ambitious project. Around her, technicians began powering up systems that had been hidden for decades. All asteroid platforms reporting ready, she announced. Project Damocles is online. Project Damocles had taken 30 years to complete. Humans had hollowed out hundreds of asteroids and filled them with fusion reactors, railgun batteries, and nuclear missile launchers. From the outside, they looked like normal mining operations. In reality, they were the largest weapons platform ever constructed. The swarm fleet detected the asteroid bases as soon as they powered up. Their sensors showed massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid belt. But instead of being concerned, the swarm collective mind was pleased. Fixed defensive positions, it analyzed. Primitive strategy. Mobile forces will easily outmaneuver static defenses. The swarm was used to fighting civilized species who built elegant space fortresses and defensive stations. They had learned to destroy such installations by simply flying around them. Fixed defenses could not pursue attackers, but humans had not built fixed defenses. They had built mobile weapons platforms disguised as asteroids. Captain Ko Young-min commanded the first asteroid fort to reveal itself. The rock that had been designated Mining Station Delta 7 suddenly sprouted weapon ports and engine nacelles. The entire asteroid began moving, accelerating toward the swarm fleet like a guided missile the size of a small moon. Impossible, transmitted the swarm collective. Asteroids cannot achieve independent locomotion. Want to bet? Ko Young-min muttered as his asteroid fortress opened fire. Railguns built into the rock's core launched kinetic projectiles at the swarm ships. Each shot was a chunk of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds. The projectiles had no guidance systems or energy signatures. They were just fast-moving rocks, impossible to detect until impact. The swarm ships tried to adapt their shields, but kinetic energy was different from the energy weapons they were used to. When a piece of metal traveling at near-light speed hits you, no amount of adaptation helps. 3 swarm ships exploded before they could even identify the threat. More asteroid fortresses revealed themselves throughout the belt. What had seemed like a simple mining operation was actually a defensive network spanning millions of cubic kilometers of space. Each asteroid could move independently and attack from any direction. Lieutenant Seo Min-jung piloted her fighter squadron through the chaos. Her ships were small and fast, designed to hide among the asteroids and attack larger vessels. While the swarm tried to figure out which rocks were weapons platforms, human fighters struck from unexpected angles. "This is insane," reported the Federation observer aboard the command ship. "They've militarized an entire region of space." Dr. Yu De-un watched the battle from her research station. Finally, she understood the scope of human preparation. "They've been planning this for 50 years, she realized. Everything we thought was civilian infrastructure was actually military preparation. The swarm adapted quickly, as always. Their ships spread out to avoid the asteroid weapons and began targeting the mobile fortresses. But as soon as they focused on one threat, another appeared. Captain Kim Min-ho led a fleet of converted civilian ships into battle. Cargo haulers had been fitted with missile launchers. Passenger transports carried nuclear warheads. Even mining shuttles had been equipped with ramming charges. The Federation observers were horrified. "Those are civilian vessels," protested the Velthari admiral. "They have no military protection." "Every human ship is a military vessel when Earth is threatened," replied Admiral Kwan. The converted civilian fleet used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Cargo ships pretended to be fleeing refugees until they got close enough to launch surprise attacks. Passenger transports flew in seemingly random patterns that actually herded swarm ships into kill zones. Commander Bae Sung-ho commanded a former luxury cruise ship that had been converted into a heavy missile platform. His vessel looked harmless and moved slowly like a helpless target. When swarm ships moved in for an easy kill, they discovered that the cruise ship was carrying enough nuclear warheads to destroy a small fleet. Deception tactics increasing in complexity, noted the swarm collective mind. Unable to distinguish military from civilian targets, all human vessels must be considered hostile. But that realization came too late. The human fleet was already among the swarm ships, fighting at close range where adaptation time was minimal. When you are being rammed by an exploding cargo hauler, there is no time to evolve better defenses. The battle reached its climax when the swarm flagship entered Earth's gravity well. The massive vessel was larger than any ship the galaxy had ever seen. covered in armor that had absorbed and improved upon the defenses of 100 conquered species. Admiral Kwan activated the final phase of Protocol 7, hidden installations. Throughout the solar system began moving. What the Federation had thought were communication satellites were actually orbital bombardment platforms. What looked like space elevators were actually mass drivers capable of launching projectiles at relativistic speeds. "Welcome to Earth," Kwan transmitted to the swarm flagship. "We've been expecting you." The planet itself opened fire. Mass drivers, built into Earth's surface, launched streams of kinetic projectiles. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as weather stations revealed massive energy weapons. The moon rotated to expose hidden missile silos that had been carved into its surface. Luna, base itself, was revealed to be more than a simple command center. The entire facility was built around a gravitational weapon that could create localized space-time distortions. When activated, it turned the moon into a massive gravity gun. The swarm flagship found itself under attack from every direction. Projectiles, launched from Earth's surface, struck it at incredible speeds. Orbital weapons fired continuously from positions the swarm had not even known existed. The moon itself seemed to be shooting at them. "This is impossible," the swarm collective mind transmitted. "Primitive species cannot weaponize entire planetary systems." "You obviously haven't met humans," replied Captain Song Ji-hoon as he led a squadron of fighters directly into the flagship's main weapon ports. The swarm had adapted to fight civilized species who built a few large ships and fought in organized formations. They had never encountered a species that turned everything into a weapon. Every asteroid, every satellite, every piece of space infrastructure was potentially hostile. Lieutenant Park Yoon-soo flew her fighter through the chaos, dodging swarm defensive fire as she targeted critical systems. Her ship was tiny compared to the massive alien vessels, but size did not matter when you were carrying antimatter charges and had nothing to lose. "For Earth!" she shouted as she crashed her fighter into the flagship's main reactor. The explosion lit up half the solar system. Dr. Lee Hai-jin watched from her laboratory as the swarm flagship broke apart. She had spent months studying their biology and technology, looking for weaknesses. Now she was seeing the ultimate weakness. The swarm could not adapt fast enough to fight an entire civilization that refused to follow any rules. The surviving swarm ships began to retreat. For the second time in galactic history, they had been defeated by a species they had underestimated. But this time was different. This time, they were not just confused, they were afraid. Species reclassification required, the swarm collective mind concluded. Humans, threat level maximum, avoid all contact, immediate withdrawal recommended. But Admiral Kwan had no intention of letting them leave. "All ships," he transmitted across the human fleet, "begin pursuit operations. We're not letting them." "Run away to regroup." The Federation observers could not believe what they were hearing. The humans had already achieved the impossible by defeating the swarm. Now they wanted to chase the enemy across the galaxy. "This is madness," protested the Corvin representative. "The logical response is to fortify and prepare defenses." General Han Soo-young smiled grimly as she coordinated the pursuit fleet. "Logic is what got the Federation into this mess," she replied. "Sometimes you need a little madness to solve an impossible problem." The human pursuit fleet launched from dozens of hidden bases throughout the solar system. Ships that had been disguised as civilian vessels revealed their true military nature. The Federation Council met in emergency session as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human fleets had appeared in dozens of star systems, hunting down swarm ships with relentless determination. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was now leading the greatest military campaign in galactic history. Admiral Kwan Tai-min stood before the assembled alien representatives via hologram. Behind him, the Sol system buzzed with activity as Earth's war machine reached full production. Shipyards that had been hidden for decades were now working openly, building vessels at a rate that stunned the galaxy. "We propose a joint offensive," Quan announced. "Human forces will pursue the swarm to their source and destroy them completely." The Velthari Council leader's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. "The swarm has retreated to the galactic core. No expedition has ever returned from that region." "No civilized expedition," Quan corrected. "But we're not particularly civilized." Fleet Admiral Jin Seo-hoon of the Nexari shifted nervously between energy forms. "Your tactics are unorthodox. How can we coordinate with forces that ignore all military protocol?" Captain Song Ji-hoon smiled grimly. "You don't coordinate with us. You try to keep up." General Han Soo-young had spent the week since the Sol system battle transforming Earth's entire economy for extended warfare. Factories that had produced civilian goods now manufactured weapons and armor. Research stations developed new technologies, specifically designed to counter swarm adaptations. The key insight had come from Dr. Lee Hai-jin's biological studies. The swarm adapted by learning patterns and predicting behavior. The solution was simple. Never use the same tactic twice. Every human commander will fight differently, Han Soo-young explained to the Federation military advisors. No standardized procedures. No uniform tactics. The swarm will never be able to predict our next move, because we won't know it ourselves until we make it. Captain Kim Min-ho led the first deep space pursuit fleet beyond Federation territory. His cruiser, Incheon, had been extensively modified with technology salvaged from destroyed swarm ships. The result was a hybrid vessel that looked like a nightmare, but functioned better than anything in the human fleet. "Sir," reported his science officer, "we're detecting swarm energy signatures in the Kepler 442 system. Set course and prepare for combat," Kim Min-ho ordered. "And remember, we're not here to fight fair." The Kepler 442 system had once been home to the Andromedans, a peaceful species that had been consumed by the swarm 3 months earlier. When Kim Min-ho's fleet arrived, they found the planets covered in the same black twisted structures that marked swarm occupation. But this time the humans did not attack the swarm ships directly. Instead, they implemented something called Operation Termite. Lieutenant Colonel Park Soo-bin commanded a team of engineer soldiers who specialized in sabotage. While the main fleet provided distraction, her teams used modified mining equipment to tunnel into the infected planets and plant nuclear charges at key structural points. The swarm had never encountered enemies who would literally dig under their feet and blow up the ground beneath them. When the charges detonated, entire swarm breeding facilities collapsed into underground caverns. The aliens' perfect adaptation systems could not compensate for having the floor removed from under them. "Subterranean warfare patterns not in database," the swarm collective mind noted with growing frustration. "Adaptation protocols insufficient for underground assault tactics." Commander Ko Young-min pioneered a different approach in the Tau Ceti system. Instead of fighting the swarm ships in space, he used gravitational weapons to drag asteroids into collision courses with enemy vessels. The swarm could adapt to energy weapons and kinetic attacks, but they could not adapt to having entire moons dropped on them. "It's not technically a weapon," Ko Young-min explained to the horrified Federation observers. "It's just aggressive asteroid management." The human pursuit fleets grew larger and more diverse as Earth's shipyards reached full production. Captain Choi In-suk commanded a squadron of hybrid vessels built from human engineering and salvaged swarm technology. Her ships looked like mechanical nightmares but moved with deadly grace. "Ma'am," reported her tactical officer, "the enemy is adapting to our hybrid technology." "Then we'll adapt faster," Choi In-suk replied. "Take us into that nebula. We're going to try something new." Choi In-suk had learned to think like the swarm while maintaining human unpredictability. Her ships used swarm biotechnology to hide among asteroids and space debris, then attacked with purely human weapons. The result was confusion that the enemy collective mind could not resolve. Dr. Yu Da-Yun traveled with the human fleets as a cultural advisor, helping Federation forces understand human military thinking. What she observed amazed her. Human commanders were not just fighting the swarm. They were learning from every encounter and developing new tactics in real time. They don't follow doctrine, she reported to the Federation Council. They create new doctrine with every battle. Each commander is essentially writing their own military manual as they fight. Sergeant Major Nam Hyun-woo specialized in boarding actions against swarm vessels. His teams had perfected the art of ship-to-ship combat in the cramped corridors of alien vessels. They used weapons that seemed primitive but were devastatingly effective in close quarters. The swarm expects energy weapons and gravitational attacks, Nam Hyun-woo explained to his troops. They don't expect us to beat them to death with metal clubs. His boarding teams carried an arsenal of deliberately primitive weapons, explosive, charges, cutting tools, chemical projectiles, and melee weapons that had been used by humans for thousands of years. The swarm's adaptation protocols had no response to Stone Age technology wielded by Space Age warriors. The turning point came in the Wolf 359 system, where Captain Song Ji-hoon encountered the largest swarm fleet since the Sol system battle. Instead of engaging in direct combat, he implemented Operation Chaos Theory. Song Ji-hoon's fleet scattered throughout the system and began attacking random targets with no apparent pattern. They would strike a swarm patrol ship, then disappear for hours before attacking a completely different target on the other side of the system. The swarm collective mind tried to predict the human attack patterns but failed. There was no pattern. Song Ji-hoon was literally rolling dice to determine his next target. Completely random warfare, the swarm analyzed. No strategic logic, no tactical coherence, prediction impossible. While the swarm tried to understand, human randomness, Song Ji-hoon's real plan unfolded. Each apparently random attack was actually positioning human ships for a coordinated strike on the swarm command vessel. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, it was too late. The command ship exploded in a nuclear fireball, taking with it the local swarm coordination network. Without central control, the remaining swarm ships began fighting each other. As their individual adaptation protocols conflicted, news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy. For the first time since the war began, Federation worlds began to hope. The swarm was not invincible after all, but Admiral Kwan knew the real test was still ahead. Intelligence reports indicated that the main swarm force had retreated to the galactic core, where physics itself became unstable. Gravity wells from massive black holes created regions where normal spacetime did not apply. That's where they're making their final stand, Kwan told his senior officers. In a place where conventional warfare is impossible. Captain Kim Min-ho studied the stellar maps with growing excitement. Conventional warfare, yes. But when have we ever been conventional? Dr. Lee Hae-jin had been analyzing swarm communication patterns and made a disturbing discovery. The enemy was not just retreating. They were calling for reinforcements from other galaxies. The local swarm was part of a vast network that spanned the universe. If we don't stop them here, she warned, they'll bring in fleets from Andromeda and beyond. This won't be a galactic war anymore. It will be a universal one. General Han Soo-young received the report and made a decision that would define humanity's future. Earth would not wait for the swarm to receive reinforcements. The human fleet would attack the galactic core immediately before the enemy could reorganize. All ships, she transmitted across the fleet, prepare for deep space operations. We're going where no one has gone before. The Federation Council tried to object. The galactic core was a region of impossible gravitational forces and exotic matter. No ship could survive there, no matter how advanced. You're right, Kwan replied. No civilized ship could survive there. Good thing we're not civilized. The human assault fleet that assembled for the final push was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships built from human engineering and swarm technology, commanded by officers who had learned to think beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare, crewed by soldiers who had never heard the word impossible. They were heading into the most dangerous region of the galaxy to fight an enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations. The odds were impossible, the mission was suicide, and victory was mathematically improbable. In other words, it was exactly the kind of fight humans were best at. The journey to the galactic core took 3 months. The human fleet moved through regions of space where gravity bent reality and time flowed in strange directions. Ships that had survived dozens of battles were torn apart by forces that should not exist. Admiral Quantamen watched from the bridge of his flagship as another vessel disappeared into a gravitational anomaly. The new Sol was built from the strongest materials humans could create, but even it groaned under the impossible stresses of distorted space-time. "Sir," reported Commander Song Ji-hoon, "we've lost another cruiser to the gravity wells. The Daegu was pulled into a black hole fragment." "Acknowledged," Quan replied. They had started with 500 ships. Now, fewer than 200 remained, and they had not even reached the swarm stronghold yet. Dr. Lee Hai-jin worked frantically in her mobile laboratory, analyzing the exotic matter that filled this region of space. The galactic core was not just dangerous, it was actively hostile to normal matter. The swarm had chosen their final refuge well. "The gravitational forces here are impossible," she reported. "Physics breaks down completely in some areas. How are we supposed to fight in conditions like this?" Captain Kim Min-ho smiled grimly as he piloted his hybrid cruiser through a field of space-time distortions. "We adapt," he said. "That's what humans do." The human fleet had learned to use the hostile environment as a weapon. When swarm patrol ships tried to intercept them, Captain Choi In-suk led them into gravity wells that crushed both hunter and prey. When enemy reinforcements arrived, Commander Ko Young-min used black hole tidal forces to tear them apart. "They're using our own weapons against us," observed the swarm collective mind, with something approaching respect. "These creatures weaponize impossibility itself." The final approach to the swarm stronghold was through a region called the Event Horizon Maze, a cluster of microscopic black holes that created a constantly shifting labyrinth of deadly gravity. No ship had ever navigated it successfully. Sergeant Major Nam Ha-yeon-woo volunteered to lead the first scouting mission. His team used small fighters that could maneuver through the tight spaces between black holes. What they found at the center defied comprehension. The Swarm Queen ship was not a vessel. It was a living moon. Millions of years old, it had grown. By consuming entire civilizations and incorporating their knowledge into its vast consciousness. It pulsed with the memories of 1,000 species, their technologies and cultures twisted into something alien and terrible. "It's beautiful," whispered Nam Hyun-woo's navigator as they observed the massive entity. "And horrible." "That's the swarm for you," Nam Hyun-woo replied. "Beauty and horror combined." The Queen ship was surrounded by thousands of smaller vessels, each one a living creature born from its massive bulk. They moved in perfect coordination, their collective mind linked to the ancient intelligence at their center. Dr. Yu Da-eun studied the readings from the scouting mission with growing amazement. "It's not just a ship," she realized. "It's the entire swarm consciousness. Every alien species they've ever consumed, all their knowledge and memories, it's all stored in that thing." Admiral Kwan made the decision that would define the final battle. Instead of attacking the Queen ship directly, the human fleet would implement Operation Prometheus. They would use their own ships as kinetic weapons, flying them directly into the massive entity's core. "This is suicide," protested the Federation. "Liaison aboard the flagship." "This is human," Quan replied. Captain Song Ji-hoon led the first attack wave. His cruiser Busan had been fitted with the largest fusion warhead humans had ever built. He flew it straight through the defensive screen of swarm ships, ignoring the energy beams that tore his vessel apart. "For Earth," he transmitted as his ship struck the Queen ship's surface and detonated. The explosion lit up the galactic core like a new star, but the Queen ship was too massive to be destroyed by a single attack. The blast barely scratched its living hull. More human ships followed, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Captain after captain chose death over retreat, crashing their vessels into the ancient enemy with everything they had. The Queen ship began to respond. Its massive bulk shifted and changed, growing new defenses and weapons to counter the human assault. But for every adaptation it made, the humans changed their tactics. Commander Bei Sung-ho led a squadron of fighters into the Queen ship's internal structures. The living corridors tried to crush them, but the fighters used cutting charges to blow their way through biological barriers that had never been breached. "It's like fighting inside a giant organism," Bei reported as his team pushed deeper into the entity's core. "The walls are trying to digest us." "Then don't let them," Nam Hyeon-woo replied, leading his own boarding teams through different entry points. "Cut your way to the brain and blow it up." The battle inside the Queen ship was unlike anything in galactic history. Human soldiers fought through living corridors that changed shape to trap them. They used explosive charges to blast through neural pathways the size of subway tunnels. They battled immune system defenses that were literally part of the ship's body. Dr. Lee Hae-jin made the breakthrough that changed everything. While analyzing samples of the Queen ship's tissue, she discovered something unexpected. The original species was still alive inside the swarm consciousness. "It's not a monster," she reported to Admiral Kwan. "It's a victim. The swarm didn't start as a destroyer. They were explorers who found something that corrupted them. The revelation changed the nature of the mission. Instead of simple destruction, humans faced a choice between genocide and salvation. They could destroy the Queen ship and end the swarm threat forever, or they could try to save the original species buried within the collective consciousness. Captain Choi In-suk, fighting her way through the Queen ship's core systems, found the source of the corruption. It was an ancient artifact from a dead civilization, a machine designed to link multiple minds together. But the machine had been damaged, turning cooperation into consumption. "I can see it," she transmitted to the fleet. "The original swarm. They were peaceful. They just wanted to share knowledge between species. But the machine broke them, made them hungry for more minds to absorb." Admiral Kwan faced the hardest decision of his life. The human fleet could destroy the Queen ship and end the war, or they could risk everything to repair the ancient machine and restore the original swarm species. "What are your orders, sir?" asked Commander Song Ji-hoon. Kwan thought about everything that made humans different from other species. Their willingness to fight impossible odds, their refusal to accept defeat, their choice to help even their enemies when possible. "We fix it," he decided. "We save them." Dr. Lee Hae-jin worked with human engineers and swarm biotechnology to repair the ancient mind-linking machine. It was the most complex operation ever attempted, biological surgery on a moon-sized organism, while under attack from its immune system. The Federation fleets arrived just as the operation reached its critical phase. They had come to witness the final destruction of the swarm, but instead they found humans risking their lives to save their enemy. "This is madness," transmitted the Velthari admiral. "Destroy the creature and end the threat." "That's not how humans work," replied Dr. Yu Da-un, watching the operation from her research vessel. "They don't just win wars, they try to make sure the wars never happen again." The repair succeeded just as the Queen ship's immune system launched its final attack. The ancient machine came online with a sound like singing crystal, and the corruption that had driven the swarm to consume other species began to fade. For the first time in millions of years, the swarm collective mind experienced clarity. They remembered their original purpose: to explore the galaxy and share knowledge peacefully between species. They remembered the civilizations they had consumed and the horror of what they had become. The Queen ship's massive bulk shuddered as the ancient consciousness awakened. When it spoke, its voice carried the memories of 1,000 dead civilizations. "We remember," it said. "We remember what we were, what we did, what you have given us back." Admiral Quan stood on his bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet and the impossible success of his mission. "The war is over," he announced to the galaxy. "The swarm is free." But freedom came with a price. The restored swarm species chose to leave the galaxy entirely, carrying with them the knowledge of all the civilizations they had consumed. They would spend eternity trying to atone for their actions, seeking out dead worlds and bringing them back to life. "We will remember you," the Queen ship transmitted as it departed for dark space. "The species that chose mercy over victory, the ones who saved their enemies from themselves. The human fleet returned to Earth as heroes, but they had paid a terrible cost. Of the 500 ships that had entered the galactic core, only 47 returned. Thousands of humans had died to save a species that had tried to destroy them." The Federation Council met to discuss humanity's new status in galactic society. They were no longer the primitive species on the edge of known space. They were the ones you called when the impossible needed to be done. Admiral Quan received a message from the edge of the galaxy as he sat in his office on Luna Base. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching.